carry on, no problem. We will not be upset at all. But we're going to read. Where are we? Right. What happened? Oh, okay. So, devotees, Hare Krishna. We are reading from, currently, the 4th volume of Srila Prabhupada-lilamrita. We started the whole, at the beginning. Yeah, okay, anyway. We started, right, September, sort of, I forget exactly the day, but maybe around the 10th of September. And now we are in the 4th volume of 6. We are in chapter 30 of 55. So we're doing good. It's nice. And chapter 30 is titled London, a Dream Fulfilled. Shyam Sundar Prabhu has met George Harrison and has met all the Beatles. John Lennon invited the devotees to stay in his, or some of the buildings around his mansion, and had Prabhupada stay too. But the devotees had to help fix up his house. Anyway, yes. And they have rented Berry Place and have got permission to live in Berry Place. Did you ever see Berry Place? No? It's, yeah, Soho Street. I mean, the location, completely unbelievable. 25 meters off one of the busiest streets in the world. Okay, so anyway, let's see, where are we up to? Right. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Shrimati Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharne Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pastyachadesha Tarane Sri Krishna Chaitanya Pramanityananda Shri Advaita Gadadha Shivas Adi Gaura Bhaktavrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Paditanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Thank you. So right, we are in London, and I'm not exactly sure where, I mean, what stage of the chapter we're in, but we're just coming up to the moon landing, and the devotees and Prabhupada, yes, right, they went, all expenses paid, to Amsterdam to appear on a television show for 5 minutes. Yeah. So we just read that, and now Prabhupada is visiting an Indian family in London somewhere around London. So, not since Prabhupada had first left India in 1965 had he preached to Indians as extensively as now. Indians would always attend his lectures, and even if they didn't dance and chant, they appreciated Krishna consciousness. Even before Prabhupada's arrival in England, a few Indians had stepped forward to help the devotees. And now, the majority of Prabhupada's occasional guests at Tittenhurst were Indians, bringing their families. They would sit and chat with Prabhupada, often inviting him to their homes for dinner. Kedarnath Gupta, Prabhupada agreed to come to our house. We received him with a warm welcome, and many other people also came to hear him. He was very much pleased to see that we had our family deities of Radha and Krishna given by my mother. And he commented, "I'm very much pleased to come to this place and see that Radha and Krishna are here." He gave a very nice lecture and told that the purpose of the human form of life is self-realization. He said one should be inquisitive to know who he is. All those assembled who had come to hear him were very much pleased and impressed by his lecture. After his lecture, I did the arti, and we offered the foodstuffs to the deity, and then we distributed prasadam to everyone. Prabhupada took the prasadam, and he was very much pleased to take prasadam in our house. As he was leaving, I requested him, "When can I see you next?" He said, "You can see me any time you want." Unquote. Sometimes there would be disagreements over philosophy, but Prabhupada's arguments were always convincing. The Indians were respectful to Prabhupada and repeatedly invited him to their homes. One of Britain's most prominent and respected Indians visited, Praful Patel, as did many businessmen with the means to help Prabhupada's mission. But few were willing to sacrifice. Anyway, they got more into it as time went on. They really got really a lot more into it. The second moon landing by American astronauts was scheduled for mid-November, only a few weeks away. This is 1969. For months, the moonshots had received much press coverage, and Prabhupada would speak of them often. Almost a year ago in Los Angeles, he had answered a reporter's queries on the possibility of man's landing on the moon. He said, "Just like we're going from one place to another by motorcar or by airplane, this mechanical process will not help us go to the moon planet. The process is different, as described in the Vedic literature. One has to qualify. According to our literature, our information, it is not possible. In this body, we cannot go there." At Tittenhurst, Prabhupada often brought up the moon landing while talking with his disciples. The moon landing was a hoax, he said one evening in his room, for they cannot go to the moon. The moon planet Chandraloka is a residence of the demigods, higher beings than these drunkards and cow-eating slaughterers who are trying to inhabit it. You cannot think this travel is allowed. Like when I migrated from India to the US, the moon planet cannot be visited so quickly. It is not possible. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada's disciples accepted his statements. He was giving not simply his opinion, but the verdict of the Vedic scriptures, because he accepted Vedic authority over modern science. So did his disciples, but not Purushottam. Detecting Purushottam's dubious mentality, Prabhupada would often joke lightly in Purushottam's presence. Someone would ask a question, "Where's Janaki?" And Prabhupada would reply, "Oh, Janaki has gone to the moon." Then everyone except Purushottam would laugh. The devotees knew of Purushottam's difficulty. He was an American and proud that the Americans were conquering space, and they knew that Prabhupada was joking about it. Purushottam was up on the latest scientific advancements. He was impressed by NASA's achievements and astronaut Neil Armstrong's giant step for mankind. Although Purushottam went on with his duties, he became sullen, and Prabhupada noticed his lack of enthusiasm. One morning, Purushottam and Yamuna were together with Prabhupada in his room. Purushottam had several days' growth of beard and was wearing the same orange sweater he had slept in, whereas Yamuna was neat and clean. Although she had only 2 simple cotton saris, Hare Krishna, she would always put on a freshly washed and ironed one before going to see Prabhupada. Looking at his 2 servants, Prabhupada said, "Yamuna, you have so many saris. They're all so beautiful." Yamuna looked up at Prabhupada in surprise. "I don't have so many, Srila Prabhupada." "No," he said, "you're wearing a new piece of cloth every day. It's so nice. You're always looking so neat and clean. And your tilak. Purushottam, what do you think? Who do you think has the best tilak?" Purushottam didn't answer. "Beautiful tilak," Prabhupada said, "means beautiful person." Wow, that's a good one. Let's get mine. Well, could be worse. Okay, right, yeah. About 6 o'clock that same evening, Yamuna was cooking puris and potatoes for Prabhupada when she heard him ring the servant's bell. Leaving the ghee on the fire, she ran up to Prabhupada's quarters. He talked with her about the lecture he would give that evening and eventually asked, "When will prasadam be ready? Before the discourse?" Yes, Srila Prabhupada, Yamuna smelled smoke. Oh my God. "Oh," she gasped, "please excuse me, Prabhupada, I left some ghee on the fire." Rushing downstairs, she found the kitchen filled with black smoke. She couldn't see the stove. "Purushottam, Purushottam," she cried. Purushottam arrived, and together they groped through the smoke. Somehow, Purushottam extinguished the fire before it caused serious damage. Purushottam and Yamuna were covered with soot. Their faces were black, and Purushottam's orange sweater, his robes, and Yamuna's sari were all blackened. Suddenly, Prabhupada rang the servant's bell, and they both hurried upstairs to tell him about the fire. When Janaki returned downstairs and saw the mess, she ran upstairs to Prabhupada's room, where Yamuna and Purushottam stood, still covered with soot, before Prabhupada. What has happened here? Janaki burst out. Prabhupada looked at her soberly. Prabhupada looked at her soberly and said, "Today, Purushottam has gone to the moon." Oh my gosh. What? Janaki asked. Prabhupada repeated, "Yes, our Purushottam has gone to the moon." Prabhupada, Purushottam said, "I am a brahmachari. Why are you saying these things?" Oh, Krishna. Being a brahmachari is no restriction from going to the moon. Anyone can go, Prabhupada said, winking. Wow, that was a classic. My gosh. What? That was a total classic. I'm going to take it out and include it in my Prabhupada stories. The devotees regularly encountered John and Yoko. Although originally interested in a business relationship, John was inclined toward the devotees. But his friends advised him not to get involved with the Swami and his group, so he remained aloof. Ishan Das. I was in the kitchen working and John was sitting at the piano. He had a piano in the kitchen, a great upright piano with all the varnish removed, bare wood. And in this way he was sitting at the piano playing Hare Krishna. The man was actually a great musician, and he played Hare Krishna in every musical idiom you could think of. Bluegrass music, or classical music, or rock and roll, or whatever. He would go at will from one idiom to another, always singing Hare Krishna. It was so natural for him, and one could see that he was a musical genius. And in this way he was entertaining me, and he was obviously really enjoying it. So anyway, while this piano playing was going on with great vigor and enthusiasm, this chanting Hare Krishna, his wife, Yoko Ono, appeared in a nightgown or what have you, and said in a very distressed tone, "Please, John, I have a terrible headache. Can't you stop that sort of thing and come upstairs with me?" Yoko. She was a serious problem. I mean, she became. Initially, she was okay, but she became a real problem. So, unquote. George was different. He was drawn to Prabhupada. When one of the devotees had asked, "Why, out of all the Beatles, are only you interested?" George had replied, "It's my karma. One of the things in my sign is the spiritual side. George Harrison. Prabhupada just looked like I thought he would. I had like a mixed feeling of fear and awe about meeting him. That's what I liked about later on after meeting him more. I felt that he was just more like a friend. I felt relaxed. It was much better than at first because I hadn't been able to tell what he was saying, and I wasn't sure if I was too worldly to even be there. That's what happened with me. I heard Prabhupada give a class at the university. I couldn't understand it. I actually couldn't understand it. Yeah. All right, anyway. But later I relaxed and felt much more at ease with him, and he was very warm towards me. He wouldn't talk differently to me than to anybody else. He was always just speaking about Krishna, and it was coincidental who happened to be there. Whenever you saw him, he would always be the same. It wasn't like one time he would tell you to chant the Hare Krishna mantra and the next time say, "Oh no, I made a mistake." He was always the same. Seeing him was always a pleasure. Sometimes I would drop by, thinking I wasn't planning to go, but I better go because I ought to. And I would always come away just feeling so good. I was conscious that he was taking a personal interest in me. It was always a pleasure. Unquote. George was attracted to Krishna and he liked to chant. Even before meeting Prabhupada, he had learnt something of Krishna from Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, from the autobiography of Paramahansa Yogananda, and from traveling in India. But Prabhupada's instructions in particular impressed upon him that Lord Krishna was the absolute truth, the origin of everything. George, Prabhupada helped me to realize the multifaceted way to approach Krishna. Like the prasadam, for example. I think it's a very important thing, prasadam, even if it's only a trick. Like they say, the way to a man's heart is through his stomach. Well, even if it's a way to a man's spirit soul, it works. Because there's nothing better than having been dancing and singing or just sitting and talking, and suddenly they give you some food. It's like it's a blessing. And then when you learn to touch him or taste him, it's important. Krishna is not limited. And just by Prabhupada's being there and pouring out all this information, I was moved. It's like the mind is stubborn, but it's all Krishna. That's all you need to know. It's all Krishna. This world is his material energy too, the universal form. And in Prabhupada's books, there are these pictures showing Krishna in the heart of a dog and a cow and a human being. It helps you to realize that Krishna is within everybody. Although Prabhupada might have been teaching some higher aspect, what came through to me a lot was a greater understanding of how Krishna is everywhere and in everything. Prabhupada explained about the different aspects of Krishna, and he provided a meditation where you could see Krishna as a person everywhere. I mean, there isn't anything that isn't Krishna. Unquote. Prabhupada saw George as a, quote unquote, nice young boy and a devotee of Krishna. According to the Bhagavatam, no matter what a person may be materially, if he's a non-devotee and never utters the holy name of God, he cannot possess any good qualities. Any in italics. Many swamis and yogis in India, even some who consider themselves Vaishnavas, had no faith in or understanding of the holy names of Krishna. But George liked to chant Hare Krishna, and he had put the holy name of Krishna in his songs, which were tremendously popular all over the world. So he was serving Krishna through his music, and that made all the difference. Prabhupada wrote, Mr. George Harrison appears to be a very intelligent boy, and he is, by the grace of Krishna, fortunate also. On the first day, he came to see me along with John Lennon, and we had talks about 2 hours. He wanted to talk with me more, but he has now gone to his sick mother in Liverpool. Unquote. Prabhupada also saw George as a rich man, and Lord Chaitanya had strictly instructed where are we? Lost the place. And devotees in the renounced order not to mix with worldly men. But Lord Chaitanya had also taught that a devotee should accept any favorable opportunity for propagating Krishna consciousness. Prabhupada wrote, if this boy cooperates with our movement, it will be very nice impetus for after all. It'll be very nice impetus, for after all, he is a moneyed man. These moneyed men have to be very cautiously dealt with in spiritual life. We have to sometimes deal with them on account of preaching work. Otherwise, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has strictly restricted to mix with them for Krishna conscious people. But we get instruction from Rupa Goswami that whatever opportunity is favorable for pushing on Krishna consciousness, we should accept. Unquote. Prabhupada dealt with George cautiously, but encouraged him to chant the Lord's name, take his prasadam, and surrender all his works to him. When the devotees in the US heard of Prabhupada's dealings with the Beatles, some of them exaggerated the closeness of the relationship, especially in the case of John Lennon. Prabhupada heard of this and immediately stopped it. He wrote, regarding the booklet you and Gargamuni are sending, in the introductory portion signed by you and Gargamuni, you have said that I am personally instructing John Lennon and George Harrison in the yoga of ecstasy. This is not very satisfactory. Of course, George Harrison sometimes comes to see me, and naturally I instruct him on the bhakti yoga. But the statement in the letter gives hint as if I've been invited by them for this. If this comes to their notice, they may take some objection, which will not go to our credit. These things should not be publicly advertised, and I do not know why this has been done. Anyway, if you have not distributed many of them, you just try to take out the portion, which is not a fact. George. Prabhupada never really suggested that I shouldn't do what I was doing. I heard that at different times he would say to the devotees that I was a better devotee because of my songs and the other things I was doing. He never actually said that to me, but I always heard that. And the good thing for me was that I didn't have a feeling that I needed to join full time. I think it would have spoiled it if he had always been on at me saying, why don't you pack in doing what you're doing and go and live in a temple somewhere. He never made me feel any different, like I wasn't quite in the club. He was never like that. I'm a plain clothes devotee. It's like that. I saw in my relationship that I should help when and where I could, because I know people in society. It's like any half-decent person. You just try and help each other out a little bit. He was always pleased with me, because anything I did was a help. I mean, not just to the Krishna temple as such, but just to anything spiritual that I did, even through songs or whatever. It pleased him. He was just always very friendly. He was always chanting. And at times he said that to me, just to keep chanting all the time, or as much as possible. I think once you do that, you realize that chanting is of benefit. There are some gurus who go around making out that they are, quote unquote, it. But Prabhupada was saying, I am the servant of the servant of the servant of Krishna, which is really what it is, you know. He wasn't saying, I'm the greatest and I'm God and all that. With him it was only in the context of being a servant, and I liked that a lot. I think it's part of the spiritual thing. The more they know, then the more they actually know that they're the servant. And the less they know, the more they think they're actually God's gift to mankind. So although he was obviously a very powerful individual, very spiritually advanced, he always retained that humbleness. And I think that is one of the most important things, because you learn, more than all the words he says, you learn really from the example of how he lives and what he does. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. So, any comment or question? Let's see if Surup Damodar Prabhu has a wise comment. Do you want to make a comment?
Maharaj, what happened to Purushottam eventually?
Well, as I understand, as I was told, he eventually departed from Krishna consciousness. Yeah. All to do with that moon business. Yeah. And from what we read, he was obviously not in the best condition. Yeah. Maybe there's details, but I'm not aware at this stage. But Srila Prabhupada said, I've mentioned it on a few occasions. Burijan Prabhu told me personally, so I take it as being authoritative, that Prabhupada told him that George Harrison's song, My Sweet Lord, I suppose you've all heard that song. Yeah, you heard that song? Okay. Of course you've heard that song. Excuse me. Prabhupada said, it is a song of separation in the mood of Sanatan Goswami. That's what Burijan Prabhu told me. So, I mean, it's really interesting to read these things. I find it very interesting. Yes.
Krishna Maharaj, how do we deal with devotees who are wealthy? I mean, in this case, Prabhupada was saying you shouldn't deal really with a moneyed man.
No, well, we have to, it depends what they think about themselves. But we have many devotees who are wealthy. Yeah, many. And including many initiated devotees who are wealthy. The wealthiest you wouldn't have met is Ambarish Prabhu, Alfred Ford. You know, he's very wealthy. Like, I don't know actually, but definitely a multi-millionaire, and possibly a billionaire. But he is such a humble and nice devotee. He is just absolutely like a really beautiful person. It's amazing. But just in our community here, there are devotees who are wealthy. But if we're talking about non-devotees who are sort of, connected with ISKCON, well, we should always be respectful to everyone, and, address them nicely and respectfully, and deal with them nicely. So we should do that with the rich ones too. Yeah. Yeah, we should do that with the rich ones. The thing is, you may not know who the rich ones are, because many of them don't show it. There's one in Cape Town, he drives a Rolls Royce. And I went in it a few times, and I tell you what, he didn't know how to look after a Rolls Royce. The thing was sort of, parts were falling off. And I thought, this guy, he's like nouveau riche. Anyway, but just be very respectful. And it's, if some of them are special people who we're trying to cultivate, in special ways, then you'll see that some of the older devotees will deal with them regularly. And yeah. I think that the simple answer, though, is just deal with them very respectfully, as we deal with everyone else. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's okay. Thank you, Maharaj.
Any other comment or question? No. What happened? Okay. All right. Okay. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. And I want to give a garland